people want to talk about what's going on beyond work. They don't just want to talk about their responsibilities and their, problem solving. Everyone has something that is relevant that you can make that connection, whether it's a TV show, whether it's, what you did over the weekend, where you are in your life. And I think I'm just always looking for those things, but also creating habits, systems, processes where those ideas surface. So it's not just talking about the weather every day.
Hey, it's Nikki Llewellyn Gregory, and you're on Gut Plus Science. You're in for a fast-paced, storytelling, action item-rich leadership growth experience. I hope you make this podcast a habit. I consider it a leadership mentoring tool. Learning together makes us better together, and that is how we change the world around us. Let's get to it. Hey, it's Nikki back on Gut Plus Science, and today I have Charlie Saffro with me. Fangirl here, by the way. Like, Charlie, you've been on a number of other shows on People Forward Network, and now it's my turn. I'm so excited to have you here. Charlie Saffro is a powerhouse leader and the founder of CS Recruiting, a top-tier firm revolutionizing hiring in the logistics and supply chain industry. Charlie is known globally, and when I say globally, 55,000 LinkedIn followers, by the way. I was like, whoa. I grabbed a lot of this intro information from LinkedIn and I was just like, I do need to mention, like, that's pretty legit. So she is known for her relentless drive, authentic leadership. When you follow her on LinkedIn, you will see that it's authentic conversation and content, deep expertise in building high performing teams. And the thing that I admire is you're always really shining a light on the stories that are happening with your team. It's like, let me take you authentically in and show you what's happening here to help others learn. Charlie's here today to share her insights on creating meaningful connections in the workplace, but also beyond. Because it's like, I think we both agree, it's like one and the same workplace, wherever we are. Charlie, let's talk about intentional connection. And I'd love for you to help us by kicking off with, really seeing human connection in a different way. When you share your passion for intentional connection, like, what's at the core of that? Let's start there.
I love that question. As a recruiter, I've always been a connector. And even before I was a recruiter, I was a connector and just get, joy out of bringing two parties together to see what they can do. And when I think of intentional connection, it's thinking about who that person is beyond their title in the workplace. And I think it's so easy to, you just form these perceptions or you assume that someone, if they're the janitor, they're just the janitor. But they probably, they do, not probably. They have a life, they have emotions, they have ups and downs, they have a history, they have stories to share. And that's really how I've always like lived my life. But also, treated my clients and treated my employees. Like, who are you behind your title? Because that's what's really important.
And it's so true. And you could reflect back on the times where you had that pivotal conversation with this person that you work with, like they're a coworker or whatever, right? And just like we were saying earlier, it's like connecting intentionally at work beyond, it's all the same. Sometimes people don't view it that way. It's like coworker box, right? But the day that I'm on this conversation with this team member and everything shifted because the conversation started to go in this other direction where I didn't just put them in that box, you know? I don't know if you could maybe bring a little bit of light about what that's been like for you or a time that you remember where you're like, here's an example, like where Sally went from Sally with the title to Sally in a whole different light.
This actually happened kind of recently. So we hired our intern from 2 years ago. She is the newest person on our team still today as a recruiter. And, I know her well, but I don't have a ton of interaction with her on the daily. But I do these 15-minute catch ups with my team once a quarter. So we get on the phone. I don't have any performance metrics in front of me. I just want to talk about you. How are you? What's on your mind? What do you want to share? And when I was on a Zoom call with her, a bird hit my window and I kind of like, jumped in surprise. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Hold on. Let me go see the bird if it's okay. And she actually opened up to me that she believes that her grandma who passed comes back to her as birds when they hit windows. And she's like, and I don't know why they have to hit the window, but she's like, every time I have something going on in my life, like I am shocked by like a bird flying into a window. And it's just how I comfort myself with signs from my grandma. And I'm a very spiritual person, Nikki, and you know that, but I don't bring it into the workplace. You don't want to overstep. And just having this like tidbit of information about her allowed me to then open up. I lost my dad almost 19 years ago. I think he comes back to me as a spider. So I know that's very like fluffy for people, but it just connected us. And it was a simple moment where I had an authentic reaction and she wasn't afraid to say something that someone else could have thought was insane, and I just received it and was like, "Oh my god, let's talk about this." So, now and anytime I unfortunately see a bird now, I, like, text her and I'm like, "Your grandma was here today." So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. And then that like recall factor in our brain, that connection that makes us think of people for certain things, right? I love that. And in so many different forms. And I'll bring that into podcasting for a minute. I'm in year 7 with podcasting. I had no idea that, the day I said yes to podcasting to be a trial marketing effort to see how it would completely change my life. I think about from day one when I was prepping with that very first guest, I'm like, what matters to you? Like, what is the most important thing? Here's the realm of what this podcast is about. Like, what fires you up? That's probably the question that I use the most and continue to use. And that's where meaningful conversations happen. And I consistently get feedback. They're like, I feel like every guest is just like so engaged on your show. And I'm like, because I don't tell them what to talk about. I asked them what matters to them, and I think that's so similar to what we're talking about here. It's like intentional connection is it's about them, right? And kinda letting that lead. So challenge us on some other just ways of thinking from, like, building this staircase for this conversation, these foundational efforts around intentional connection.
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to a habit that I have picked up and where it came from, my first job out of college, I had a boss who was, like, totally frantic, like, her hair was always on fire and just, couldn't slow down, but she would do this thing where every so often she would leave me a Post-it note on my desk with, like, a $5 gift card, and I would come in the next morning and it would say, "Thanks for bearing with me yesterday. Thanks for staying late. Thanks for making sure that email got out." And the gift card was usually to McDonald's because I like McDonald's coffee better than Starbucks. And I didn't realize it, like, "Oh, that's so nice. Thanks for the gift card. Thanks for the Post-it." And then when I started my company and started hiring and building a team, it was something I just organically started doing. I'd be, in the office after everyone left, and I would just leave a note here and there, and then it became a card in an envelope, and then it became, every Valentine's Day, I give everyone on my team these little Wendy's free Frosties for a year, which is another story, but, like, it's and I just write a note to them about something that we've shared or something that I know they need to hear. It's free. It takes 5 minutes. I don't make it a checklist item. I do it when I'm inspired, when I feel like it, but the coolest thing about it is I have so many current and even former employees that now practice this ritual. So we have a manager on our team who's now known internally for sending her direct reports cards in the mail. And one of my former team members said she's now known at her new job for being like that girl who's always leaving a post-it. So it's just amazing. Like it's intentional and the ripple effect. Like I got to go back and give that, frantic boss credit for those little gestures that ended up shaping me and my culture.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I really like what you said about this is not a checklist item. When I go leave these notes, this is a natural way of being, which is this is a habit you've created. And there's some times where like our personality styles or who we are lend to, oh, this is just naturally who I am and I'm going to easily build that habit. There's other people that that's not maybe a natural way of building and the habit takes time to become the habit, takes more. How do you advise that wherever you are on that spectrum, that those rather than check the box, like, how do you start to build the habits?
That was something we thought a lot about as we scaled our company because, when you start a business, the purpose, the values, the mission generally comes from the owner, but then it becomes this collective thing. And recognition and appreciation have always been important to me, but it was something I could control when it was just me. And as I've built a team and we have, an HR team in place now, that is part of their responsibility set, and we've talked a lot about how do we formalize this without formalizing it? because you don't want to say, "Oh, have I told Nikki thank you yet this year?" Like, I'm just gonna drop her a thank you even though we haven't really connected. And so we've worked very hard to make it a ritual that is built in. So, for example, we have a separate budget for, I forget what we call it, but it's like caring for employees. So if an employee has, a really bad day or a really bad situation at work, or they broke up with their boyfriend, like we have a little slush fund where we'll send them flowers or we'll send around a card and have everyone like, things that we're aware of. We did learn though that this is not everyone's nature and not everyone is, constantly thinking of who they can recognize and appreciate. And so simple little things, we use an employee engagement platform, and every week by Thursday at the end of the day, our employees are prompted to like answer, a series of questions about their week that will then feed into the agenda for their one-on-one with their manager the next week. We added a question to that, to the standard questions that just says, is there anyone you want to recognize this week? And what's amazing is that like Thursday at 4 o'clock, the form connects to our Slack. So all of a sudden these Slacks start going off, and it's usually like Thursday afternoon because everyone's filling out their form, and they can leave it blank, but we prompt them, we put it in their face. And when you actually stop at a Thursday afternoon, is there anyone that I could thank for their help this week? Like there better be. Yeah, there's a lot of people. So who do I want to acknowledge? And it's authentic, it's organic, it's put on a platter and served to them, but it's not forced. So it's those little things in offices that just, yeah, make such a big difference.
Oh my gosh, so many questions. First of all, you've said the word ritual at least 4 times, and I'm so used to that word in the realm of building community. I know that that's one of those very core practices, and I'm almost like, "Huh, wait a second. That actually is in the workplace, like our team, we are a community." And so I'm just curious because you've used that word, and I don't know how many people as leaders or just in their day-to-day are using that word. What does that mean? And obviously it's powerful because you brought it up. Talk more about rituals.
Yeah, I mean, to me, a ritual is like an intentional, widespread habit. I think that's how I would think of it. And it's funny, I never really think too much about saying that word, but I guess it is part of our culture and part of what we've built is if things work, it's not a one-off. It's a ritual. It's something that represents who we are. And if there are philosophies or budgets or processes in place that can support the longevity of it, it's really amazing. Every workplace has a lot of rituals, but you sometimes have to think harder to identify them. So, yeah, I would say like the gratitude, like it's a very intentional ritual where we tee our team up to appreciate each other. But again, it's not forced, it's just part of the design.
And you think just kind of dissecting this here for a second, it's like anyone that's listening to this show has culture somewhere in their priorities, right? But we also remind that even if you're not working on a culture, there's a culture. Culture, you could have a terrible culture, but why not be proactive about it to build a culture? So I think we all are doing that on this show because that's really it's about bettering a workplace. And then I'm thinking like when you were saying ritual multiple times, I think norms are something it's like we're going to create norms, cultural norms. I think rituals are this more proactive. Like there's something that's like a level up and almost like here's the norm. We're going to submit our priorities every Monday by noon. Whereas what you were saying about the notes that you do, someone else on your team to scale how that leader intentionally connects, it might not be a note. They may create this other ritual where it's not this like, here's what we are doing. And I think that's the difference that you're trying to illustrate is it's this, I don't know how to say that. Like,
I think you really described it well. I mean, we have a client who they're a trucking company, they have a big warehouse, and they have this, like, big open grill by the door of their warehouse, and he is known for every Monday making breakfast for his employees, and he posts it on LinkedIn where he's flipping eggs and bacon, and it's like, we place people at this company, and they come back to us, and they're like, "I know this seems minor, but it is, like, my favorite part of the week. It makes coming in on Monday important. It makes me feel like I matter." And it's a ritual that he probably created for himself, to be honest, or maybe for himself and his original partner, like, "We gotta eat, so let's just make it a family affair." And those things, they slip through the cracks, or you can really, just magnify them and make them really powerful.
yeah. And I think that's the other thing too on this is on the intentionality. It's a constant making them more powerful. Yes, we've been doing this for a while, but it's not the exact same way since 2007. We're constantly intentionally looking for new ways. I'm curious to go back to your employee engagement software and the weekly nudge. I love how it's feeding into Slack. So, whatever that tool is, that's your number one tool, right? Like, use that. You said this feeds the one on ones or something like to tee them up. How does the employee engagement regularity or ritual then help fuel more intentional conversations?
I love that question. I've actually never thought about it, but when I think about, I'm a leader and not a manager, and I call that distinction very clearly. I have tried to manage. It is not my strength. It's not where I thrive, but the hardest thing for me as a manager was to stay consistent with like these meetings and conversations. If I had 4 account managers and I, met with them for a half hour every week, how do I give them equal time, equal feedback, make sure they have their voice in those meetings? And I would just kind of be all over the place. Like I would, take off on tangents based on what's going on with one account. And I think that this platform, it sets a system. It's not forced. Again, it sets a system where our team knows what is going to be discussed in every one-on-one they have every week with their direct manager. It flows. It's a natural conversation because they have put the information in the week before that they want to talk about. They've been intentional about this is how I want to use my time with my manager. There's no surprises. And I bet if every person on a team compared notes, like, yeah, our meetings pretty much go the same way as yours. And each week it's consistent. What we talk about is different and what we dive into. But I wish I had that as a manager because I look back and I'm like, I did such a disservice to them by just letting them talk or go on tangents. And I think this just sets us up in so many ways. Another ritual, kind of, but that wasn't how we intended to use it in the beginning. We just wanted to collect info on their vibe at the end of the week. And then we're like, wait, this is a stop point where we have their attention. How do we use information, to keep our momentum in some way?
Oh, I love that. There's so many systems, scalability initiatives that I'm seeing here, which what leader doesn't want to learn that? So it's just fantastic going alongside of like intentional connecting, but everything tends to have like the system underneath, which I think is so key, right? You've mentioned before, and this ties to the slush fund example you gave about take care of the whole human. And then you were talking about the slush fund, different parts of our life and how you see whole human. Talk about that.
I never want to pry or overstep. There are employees that we've had over the years that are incredibly private, and I respect that. But I also would say that give us a year with them and they're going to open up just because they're going to feed off the energy and just the way we interact. And, it's transparent, but it's not uncomfortable. So I actually just had a bunch of my catch ups with a couple team members today, and I haven't talked to them since the holiday. It's like, share what you want. Like, you could say you hung out with your boyfriend. If you want to talk about your boyfriend, I will follow your lead. If you start telling me where you met him, if I ask you about him and you're short with me, like, let's talk about something else. But people want to talk about what's going on beyond work. They don't just want to talk about their responsibilities and their, problem solving. Everyone has something that is relevant that you can make that connection, whether it's a TV show, whether it's, what you did over the weekend, where you are in your life. And I think I'm just always looking for those things, but also creating habits, systems, processes where those ideas surface. So it's not just talking about the weather every day.
Right. Yeah. And as no matter what kind of person you are, but I'll just take the high achiever style for a moment here is, you get to a place where, okay, the next new car, the next milestone revenue goal. It's exciting, right? Like, but it like gets old real quick and it's not the stuff that's like internal peace driven or life fulfillment stuff, right? And it's you get to this place where, man, my morning club at the gym is so powerful because if it weren't for you guys, like I wouldn't be here. And then I would be feeling like, lack of energy or whatever. And it's like, that is so freaking meaningful. And when we have those opportunities to support each other at work through like Chelsea on my team constantly is giving me new ideas about ingredients to incorporate into my food. so that I just feel better, right? And like a new style of cooking that doesn't take this long and never warm up your food in plastic. Like it's like anytime I even see that, I'm like, oh my gosh, if she were here, she'd be, but those things that are just so valuable, way beyond, sometimes those like huge milestone things, it's the core stuff, and when your work and I'm always, like, shy about saying work family because I think there's some inauthentic stuff there. Work peeps, right? Like, where you have tightness that is in your whole life, it's like, this is so much more than a job. Like, I'm meeting new goals for myself, and I'm feeling my very best. I don't know if you have any comments there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so different than when I was, early in my career because we have social media now too. And I think it helps us more than it hurts us in this situation, not in all situations. But, I follow a lot of my team members on Instagram. And if they allowed me to follow them, they're opening up that part of their life to me. And there's a lot of times I'll just be like, "Oh, how was the movie?" And they're like, "How do you know I saw a movie?" But, social media has done that where we're, more involved in someone's life from the outside, whether they know it or not. But I do think my team members really have formed these bonds. I mean, when I look at our Slack, like the channels that are the most fun are other people's pets. Or there's like a useless channel and it's like random, life hacks and stuff. So that's where you see the team coming together and dropping just random facts that really add up and show you who they are as a person.
And, like, you're like, "Oh my gosh, you said my dog was cute. I can't even tell you something more, like, meaningful than that. I know she's so adorable," right? Like but yeah, it's the things that, like, really, really matter to us and just being able to connect, yeah.
I mean, we have a channel for like plants because we found like some of our team members have kids, some have pets, but some people have neither and they love nurturing plants. So we're like, okay, we'll create a plant channel, show off your plant growth, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes. I have one of those on my team. My girl on my team, she's always like her newest plant baby. We always have them everywhere. I'm like, "She has some good oxygen over there all the time."
Exactly, and what's funny is because I see people commenting on that channel, if I ever read an article about plants or gardening, like, I forward it to them. I don't know anything about it, I'm not even interested, but I'm like, "Ooh, you're always talking about those plants or that labradoodle or whatever it is." So, just observation and picking up little tips about that whole human.
Yeah. I know that another thing that you're passionate about, and it ties right into just how we connect with each other, is authentic communication. So, the news might not be that great. Like, hey, we set out to like do these major milestones and, bonuses were going to be happening in Q3, but maybe they're not. Or, someone on the team, there's just this news that's like really hard to convey, or regularity of communication, just all the things. Give us the best tips from Charlie about authentic communication.
Yeah, I'm an empath and it's really hard to be a leader that's an empath because I do feel emotions. It's more than just putting myself in someone's shoes, which I think a lot of leaders need more empathy and sometimes I feel like I have too much of it. What has worked for me for those conversations because I mean, that is probably the one thing I would have said I want to avoid in my career is hard conversations. And it's probably the one thing I've like unfortunately mastered. I like to share how I'm feeling coming into the conversation, and I don't know if I do it more for me or them, but, if I have to lay someone off and I, dread those conversations, but thank you for your time. I wanna just start by saying this is gonna be a really tough conversation. This has been weighing on me. I need to discuss it with you. And I feel like when you involve your emotions and you let someone kinda see, like, I know this is not about me. I know at the end of the day, I'm going to break your heart on this call, but I want you to know that I see this as hard and I don't wanna have this conversation, and I'm going to give you space to give me feedback. And I think that's something most leaders avoid, like, never show emotion in the workplace. And there's a little, like, feedback tip I use also. FBI is the acronym, and, if I wanted to give you feedback, Nikki, on whatever, your podcast style, I would start with my F is my feelings, B is behavior, I is impact. So I could say, "Nikki, I felt caught off guard today when you started asking me questions we didn't prepare for, and I don't feel like our conversation was as good as it could have been." And when you start doing that, you realize people can't deny your emotions. So if you start with like, this is, I feel this way because of something you did. If I misinterpreted it, please clear it up now. But I want you to know how it made me feel so we can talk about it. I learned that from my friend Kristen Hadid, an author, but it's like something I literally like every time I have to give hard feedback, I'm like, FBI, they can't deny my and I share that with my kids. And yeah, you can't deny my emotions. They may not resonate with you, but this is what I'm feeling and I'll tell you.
Oh, that's so good. I remember the day that I learned in, like, marriage counseling or whatever, like, I statements, right? And I'm like, "I still use those." Like, we use those in our house, and it works pretty well. This is great because it's a version of that. Like, you can't argue with how I feel, but it gives more meat on the why, which is, like, the outcome, the impact, right? And here was the thing that was done. I really like that FBI model, and I'm also a huge fan of Kristen Hadid. Thank you, Kristen. That's a great thing to learn. I love it. You've also mentioned, and this goes back to me talking about whether you're working on culture or not, it's there, right? So might as well put the effort in to make it good. Culture is created by all of us. What do you mean exactly? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think culture is designed and it also falls into place by default. So when I was a solopreneur, if somebody would have said, "What's your company culture?" I'd be like, "I don't know, it's me." Like it's just it defaulted to the way I behave and what I believe in. But then you hire your first employee, second, and it becomes this little melting pot of everyone's like infusions. I have so many examples, but I'll share one. I was at a conference leading a workshop a couple months ago, and we were talking about being acknowledged on your anniversary. And there were probably 60 people in the room. And I said, "How many of you were recognized on your last work anniversary by your leadership team?" And 6 out of 60 people raised their hands. And they were happy to be appreciated, but it was very minor. It was like, I got a plaque, or, my boss left me a note, or my team left me a donut, whatever it is. And one woman at the end of the sharing raised her hand and she said, "Well, I didn't want to chime in because my leadership team actually doesn't do anything for our anniversaries. But this year was my 10-year and my team came in early and they decorated my cube with streamers and balloons and they left me my favorite muffin and a cup of my favorite coffee." And she's like, "And that is why I show up every day. And that is why I will be there another 10 years to see what they'll do for my 20th." And just when you say something like that, it's like, oh, like the leadership team probably instilled it in some fashion, but they don't know what's going on. And that's where her team is contributing to her experience. And they're creating this culture of care and recognition, whether it was intentional in the first place or not. It just shows that not everything falls on a leader, but it also is this like collective effort. If you can just keep hammering the same ideas in a positive way, like, "We care about each other, we care about each other, these are the things we do to show that," and then you start to see that ripple effect again.
Yeah, that's really cool. We implemented something a couple of years ago. I think this is our third year having our culture code. So it lives beyond our core values to say, what are the behaviors lived out? So, prioritizing work life integration, embracing failure, asking for help, things like that. And it just becomes this like talk track. And because we've got the code and we're regularly like, as a ritual on team meetings, giving shout outs or examples or whatever, it just helps to continue to help others emulate that. Well, it's been so helpful. There's a company that had shared like a case study about how that like changed their company. And it's probably my most proud thing that we've done because from a, like you said, there's you. And then like my first team member, Stephanie, who I think you have had the chance to meet, we worked together in another company. So we kind of knew each other and whatever. And then the third person that comes in had never worked with us. And it's like, how do you keep that consistency with like how we show up to our clients and how we put our stuff out online, and now it's like, my team members write stories about the culture code. It's so cool.
Exactly, that's so cool, and that when I started the business, I started in 2010, I was pregnant with my 3rd son. I'm gonna say there were at least 6 or 7 years there where we never had another employee with children. So, for that, initial sprint, I was the only parent on our team, and so I didn't think about other people being parents. I was like, "I'll just figure it out." I've got my system. I have, the community and the carpooling and the nanny. But as my team members matured, individuals that we hired when they were single out of college, they met a man, they married, they had children, we have evolved. I mean, we had to come up with maternity and paternity policy. We created a specific leave and ways to support team members that have any infertility struggles or a loss of a pregnancy. And so those are things that, like, if I would have created that when I was the only person not planning to have more children, why did I just create this whole policy for our handbook that no one's using? But it's also like reacting and adapting. They were the same people, but they were at a different place in their life where they had different priorities and we had to meet those. But meeting them is so much more than just like supporting them. It's policies, it's handbook processes, it's contracts and legal, and really committing to providing what they need based on where they are in their life.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And there's like a theme here. I just recorded earlier today with someone who was talking about they ran a survey to understand more of the demographics of their people. Over 50% were in the sandwich generation. I don't know what the exact ages were, but we know what that is, right? They then went out and they had all of their team members that were in that and beyond say their favorite resources to be able to support this. They started to put, you know, resources like time off and whatever to support that. Completely changed the game. Retention went like totally in a different direction the next year. But just the power of like, as we grow, change, shift, hire, fire, whatever, it's different people and different needs.
How do you collect that information? Like, ignorance is bliss. Like, I have learned that many times as a leader. Like, yeah, I assume everything's great because no one's complaining, but then you put a survey out there, you have to be really courageous to solicit feedback when, yeah, otherwise you could just assume all day.
Yeah. And make sure that you do address the feedback. I think that's the other thing. One thing, it's like you got to be courageous to, it's like, it is what it is. We need to approach that. But how many times is it like people will say, I took that survey, I gave that feedback, I haven't heard anything for a year? It's like, they're not going to fill it out next time. I wouldn't.
Exactly. I'll tell you a funny quick survey story. We did not do surveys for 10 years. And in 2020, once we were remote and just feeling a new normal, we started doing employee engagement surveys. And the first survey came back, and the first thing I read was it said, Charlie sends too many after hour emails and it gives the entire team anxiety. Are we supposed to respond to her 24 hours a day? And when I read that, I mean, of course, I took it personally at first, but I was like, I'm just working hard, guys. I'm just trying to get it all in. And then we ended up doing something about it. And we talked to them like, I never really thought about how the recipient feels. If you open your phone at 10 p.m. and see that I just sent an email, do not respond. I just had to get it out of my inbox. But we just created a policy that's no emails between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. internally, unless it's an emergency. I've never had an emergency. So, and I schedule send. I still work when I want, but it just respects like work life balance. And you could argue all day, like, well, then don't check your email if it gives you anxiety. But I just feel like my team saw, like, someone was brave to speak up. I received that feedback. The team worked together, and we've had this policy for 5 years. And like, we're known for it. Like, it's part of our DNA. We just don't bother each other after hours unless we absolutely have to. So yeah, and that was something that had to come out of a survey that I never wanted to see the results. And, it turned out to be something really good.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad you snuck that story in there. That's so powerful. Okay. Well, Charlie, with that, there's been so much here. Thank you for sharing just so many nuggets, right? Things we can actually take and do, which is what I'm trying to do here. So, hope you all enjoyed it. We're going to head over to our lightning round where Charlie, for 7 years, we've been building this ever growing recommended reading list of favorite books. So, I know most people are like, just one? If you could pick one that changed your life, that's a recent read that's just epic, like what is that book for a leadership audience that you want to add to?
Oh man, I really have two, but I'm gonna give you one. And it may be on your list already. Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. It's a book about a time, and you know who Jay Shetty is? So he's gotten like really popular since he wrote this book, but he went on like a silent retreat for like 2 years or something crazy and lived at like a monk institute. I'm getting all the language wrong, but what he learned about sitting in silence with his thoughts, and like that book is just nugget after nugget. Like, it's all annotated, all highlighted. So I would say that's probably, whether it's personal development, professional, there's just a lot of good, and it's not super spiritual. It's not religious. It's just good self-awareness. So I'd say that's probably number 1 on my list.
I'm gonna put that on my list because totally out of my box would be a silent retreat in like 2 years. I'm like, even if it were 2 weeks, like, dang, lots to learn there.
Yeah, I just did that, 2 weeks ago. I went on a solo trip for 3 nights. And it would have been my biggest fear 10 years ago, and it was lovely.
Wow. Okay. I wanna learn more about that. Yeah. Okay. So tell me about Dear Mr. Saffro, and I'm not talking about your husband.
So my real name is Charlie. My parents were hippies in the '70s, and I'm not Charlotte or Charlene, but my whole life I've been mistaken for a boy. Charlie is such a popular girl's name now, but for 35 years, no one had ever met a girl named Charlie. So I was invited to join the Boy Scouts, not the Girl Scouts. I was put in a boys' dorm first day of freshman year. But beyond that, I work in the trucking and logistics industry, very, very male dominated. And I truly, truly believe that I got a start by sending emails and people thinking I was a man and I didn't correct them. I didn't lie, but I didn't correct them. So they would say, "Dear Mr. Saffro," whatever. And then I would just respond and say, "Best Charlie." And then I would show up for the call, show up for the meeting, show up on the Zoom, and they're always surprised. And I just have to wonder, like, would you have taken this meeting if you knew I was a woman? So it's helped and hindered me, but it's always a topic of conversation because someone is always like, "Oh, so, is it Charlotte or can I call you Chuck?" Or like there's always a comment about my name, but I hated it growing up because I always stood out and I learned to embrace it and realize like standing out is a good thing. So if it's connection point, let's use it.
That's so cool. I love your name, by the way. Okay, so what's the thing that you do now? What is it, 6 days a week, but you didn't start until you were 32?
Yoga. I was a runner. I was kinda anti-yoga for no reason. I just, like, thought of the people I knew who did yoga, and they were, just I don't know. I was like, "That's just not me. They're free spirits, and I'm all structured." But I started going to yoga 13 years ago, almost 14 years ago when my 3rd son was born, and I vowed to never run again, and I haven't. And I fell in love with it. I went in very skeptical, and it has changed my entire being. It's led to, meditation, it's led to different retreats, to community, to friends, to exercise, all that. So I just wish I knew about it sooner or was open to it sooner.
Yeah. I share that with you. I didn't find yoga until way later, and I just didn't think I was wired for it, but it is one of my most coveted, practices. On Mondays, I have a class that I have to be at live at 5:15, and with traffic and all that, it means, like, because Mondays, I'm always like, "Oh, Monday," and all these things. It's like, nope, that is how I set my week, and when I don't have it, it's almost like not doing a morning routine.
Exactly. And I'm like a 6 a.m. yogi. And as much as I hate getting up early, I get it done and no one bothers me. And it's like sacred time that I have to myself guaranteed.
Yeah. You're a better person because of it, I'm sure. Yes, it's so good. Okay, so tell us about the next bucket list keynote stage. Give us as much as you can about what this stage is like, who's in the audience, what you're talking about, because I'm hoping that someone here is going to be able to connect that next big step for you.
I love it. I have been speaking as part of my career for many years, but speaking about topics that my work audience wanted to hear. And as I mentioned, like supply chain, logistics, transportation, hiring trends, interviewing skills. And I love that. And that is the world I've been immersed in. But last year, I had an opportunity to speak in front of a group of women. And I just realized, like, wow, I really am passionate about talking to a different group with a different message, and the message is more about everything. I mean, it's about imposter syndrome, it's about burnout, which is real, it's about work-life balance, it's, how to get confidence when you're, the only woman in a room of men, and so different stories, and I actually when I talk to women, I tell the story about my name because I think that, you know, people thought I was a man. Is that really why got a head start? And what would have happened if my name was Mary? So that is my passion is talking to either women or leaders, industry agnostic. I still and always will talk in my industry, but it's just a different feeds me differently when I'm talking to an audience that I've really, really been in their shoes and they can resonate with what I'm saying.
Love that. Best way to connect with you.
Find me on LinkedIn. I've got it open 24 hours a day. So, no, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn as a recruiter, obviously, and love just sharing thoughts there and commenting and engaging. So, would love to connect there.
Charlie, it was awesome to have you on Gut Plus Science today and to talk about intentional connection, not checking the box, not just, oh, I need to make sure that I'm building a connection here, but really starting with the care to want to get to know the person beyond the title or beyond the thing and as a human. Love so many of your tips today and your stories. So I think the first thing to take away is get to know people beyond the title and then understand what matters to them. Going deep, those things that make you remember them because that's the thing that matters to them. And that's why we check in and we send them nudges is because we've got to know them and what matters to them. And there's things in life that make us think of them and our communication then matters more. Charlie talked about the power of rituals. And I think there's culture norms or cultural norms, and then there are rituals. And we talked about the difference in those and the power of both. There's a lot of intersection there. But I would encourage you as you are leading your team to new heights this year, what are the rituals that are your foundation and the autonomy that you bring to your leaders to live within your systems, embracing your rituals, but making the rituals theirs, like the sticky note notes that Charlie would leave. What is that way for each of our leaders to do little simple things of reflection that help people know that we care and heard them, but the power of rituals. I love the reminder about employee engagement software technologies that help us to fuel meaningful connection with others and really gain insights that on a regular basis help us have more meaningful, real, authentic conversations. The reminder to show emotion and to embrace showing emotion. And then finally, the FBI feedback model, the I feel, and then the because of the behavior and resulted in this impact. Love that. And I could go back and listen to that a couple more times just to really get that. But the FBI model for feedback, a powerful way to connect and to help others feel heard and to have really meaningful feedback conversations. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Charlie. We just left the world a little bit better. Now, go do something with it.